Hey there, fellow presenters. Professor Wolters here. Have you ever really wondered, how do I organize my presentation to make sure that my audience understands my main points? Well, this video is here to help you organize your presentation so it can be the most effective presentation you can give, and so your audience walks out going, I actually learned something here today, all right? And to do that, what you really need to do is focus on the 3 W's. Ask yourself, why, what, and who. And it's important you start with the why question. Why am I giving this presentation? Think about it. Is it to provide information? Is it to try to sell things? Is it to show my professor that I learned what they taught in class? You really have to think about this, because it could be to represent your function. I am here to show you what it's like to be a professor or to be a marketer. These are things you really have to think about. And when you start answering those why questions, what's cool is it helps you really focus down, because you keep asking why. Why am I giving this presentation? Oh, because I have to do it for my class. Why? Well, because the professor has to grade me. Why? Because the professor has to see that I understand the material. Why? Because they have to get me ready for the real world. Okay, so it helps you really focus down on things you should really talk about. Or you might look at it in terms of the why, like, what's happening that I want to change or clarify or get right, or there is some confusion. Why is there that confusion, right? You're starting to get some ideas. And what you start to see, the more you ask why, the more drilled down you get, the more obvious it becomes what you should talk about, okay? And the thing is when you move in that what question about your presentation, you'll start to see that you come up with like 4 or 5 main what's you want to get across, 4 or 5 main objectives for your presentation, because you don't want to have more than 4 or 5 key points, because people's minds just blur out after a while. That's why sometimes when you learn something, you're like, later on, you're like, this was so easy. Why did I have trouble learning it? Well, yeah, if you're learning 50 different equations at the same time, it's hard to learn that. But if you're only learning 3 or 4 equations at a time, oh, I got that, I understand that. And that's what we're looking for. You really want to ask that why question, so you get down to 4 or 5 what's. What is it that they really need to know? Because people can only absorb so much information. And so when you're doing that, kind of think of ways they're going to help people take in that what. You have those mnemonic devices, right? You have the KISS, keep it simple, stupid, right? Or YOLO, right? You only live once. You have these things to help people remember your point, like the 3 W's, why, what, and who, right? You have those things to help people. Hey, how you doing? Oh, thanks, you too. And so you have this kind of stuff you think about, all right? But the thing is, it's not just a mnemonic device. Sometimes you use a different vehicle. Sometimes use examples for people. I mean, that's one of the things that really helps. If you're talking to your audience, what relates to their lives, right? What's an example that's going to help them understand? So a lot of times in my presentation to my students, I'll talk about student life to show marketing. And so they understand, like, oh, when they do those, 50 cent, you call it deals? Well, that's a pricing thing that's a leader pricing. They bring people into the bar. That's what they're trying to do. Like, oh, I understand, because that example relates to them. And the thing is, you can use your slides to help you get that point across. There's a lot of different things you can do. I mean, but I want you to get don't forget the idea is when you're thinking of giving a presentation, your presentation is just not your slides or your examples. Your presentation is that idea you're trying to get across to people, or those 4 or 5 ideas you're trying to get across, those what's. That's what you're trying to get across. So figure out the best way to get that across to them. And that leads us into the W, the who. So we've got the why we're doing the presentation. We got the 4 or 5 things we want to get across, right? We thought about some examples that might work, but now we really need to focus on the who we're talking to, or to whom you're talking to. And the thing is, when you start looking at that, you have to realize is participants are going to be different. Their background, the information they have, their level of knowledge on the subject is going to be different. When I teach a freshman course about marketing, it's very different than when I teach a executive level course on marketing, because they have different backgrounds, they have different experiences, and so you have to consider that in your presentation. And that's why you look at it and think about, what do they already know about this topic? I mean, this is one of the things where some people get upset with consultants, because consultants will tell you things you already know, and you're like, oh, I already know that. You're like, well, we're letting everyone know these things. So maybe if you know your audience already knows a certain amount, you don't have to start at point A, you can start at point B or C, because they already know all these things. Now, another thing that's going to be important with your audience is really got to ask yourself, are they really going to be interested in this topic? Because I know I have a class, I've done multiple classes, and when I have a class that students choose to take, an elective class, I have a social media marketing class, the students are like, yes, I want to do this because they chose to do it. They're more excited to learn. But when I teach my introduction marketing course that everybody has to take, students are like, oh, I have to be here. Ugh. And if you have an audience like it, what you have to really think about is a with them. What's in it for me? What's in it for them? Think about it. You gotta give things, you gotta give examples that are gonna relate to their lives, like we talked about before, those examples. Make sure they relate to them so they show why is this important to you. You may think, why is it important for me to know how to do a good presentation? Well, how are you gonna sell your product? How are you gonna sell yourself to a business? You gotta present well, right? Oh yeah, you're right, maybe I should pay attention. Exactly, that's why you look for those what's in it for me's. And you deliver on those, okay? And I think some other things you really need to think about when you're giving a presentation about the who, also think about what they expect you to talk about. Because if I have a presentation that's titled San Antonio and Texas, well, don't you expect me to talk about San Antonio and Texas? But if I only talked about San Antonio, you're like, wait, it says San Antonio and Texas. If it was San Antonio, Texas, then okay, I understand it's just San Antonio. But if it's San Antonio and Texas, I expect you to talk about both of them. So understand what your audience is expecting you to talk about. This is why people get upset with politicians or actors or whatever, celebrities, because there's a big, brouhaha, and they have a press conference about this brouhaha, but they never talk about the brouhaha. Look, we expect you to talk about the brouhaha. Not, oh, we're doing all these great things and I'm going to spend some time with my family. No, we want to know about that big thing, right? And so make sure you know what they expect you to talk about and deliver on that. And when you're looking at your audience, also kind of think about how fast they can absorb the material. I know I've taught at multiple schools. I've taught executive. I've taught actually some courses to high school students as well. And there's different levels that people can absorb the content. I've taught the same course in different schools around the world. And in some places, we could go through the whole book in a semester. Another place, it took the whole year to go through the book. It's just how people absorb the information in it. That's why those who, when you're giving that presentation, you're watching your audience. You're reading your audience. Are they getting it? Make sure you figure out, are they absorbing it, and adjust accordingly. And then the last little thing I think is important for you to think about with the who is also think about what's their mindset. Do they have any prejudices or preconceived notions about things? And you may think of it going in what they expect me to say, but you also have to look at them, is there any attitudes or beliefs they already have? Because when I talk to high school students about going to college, they're kind of prejudice and expectations for college is different than what my college students actually are experiencing. So you have to kind of have that, balance those things out. So I hope this helps you organize your next presentation better. Remember, ask yourself why. Why am I giving this presentation? Why? To focus down on those 4 or 5, those key points you want to talk about. Because remember, people can't do more than 4 or 5. They can, but it's not always the case. And then look at the who. Who are you speaking with? With whom are you talking or delivering this presentation to? So you can really develop it so it speaks to them, so they can absorb it better and make it a much more impactful presentation. So I hope this helps you out. If you like it, hit that like button. We got more videos to help you do better presentations. Just go on our website and check it out. Bye.